Hello from Washington, D.C. I'm Rick Sylvester. On behalf of the Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition Reform and the Administrator of the Office of Federal Procurement Policy, welcome to today's broadcast, our best and final in a series of fall broadcasts. These broadcasts are part of a continuing effort to provide you, the acquisition community, with timely, up-to-date information so that we can fulfill our goal of becoming the world's smartest, most efficient, most responsive buyer of best value goods and services that meet the warfighter's needs and are obtained from a globally competitive national industrial base. For the first time in the history of our broadcasts, we have a live studio audience. Audience, I'd like to welcome you to our broadcast. Today we're going to look at how Earned Value Management, or EVM, has become an invaluable management tool for defense contracts. We'll begin with an introduction to the history and evolution of EVM, followed by a discussion and question and answer period with our panelists and our studio audience. After a short break, we'll watch some case studies that demonstrate how EVM has been used effectively in several current programs, both here and abroad, as well as in industry and other government agencies. Then we'll focus on how we can implement EVM in your programs during an in-depth discussion with a second panel of experts. To participate in today's broadcast, we've brought together some extremely knowledgeable acquisition professionals. On my far right, we have Dave Musio from the Office of Federal Procurement Policy, the Executive Office of the President. Next, Jill Pettibone from DCMC and the DoD Executive Agent for Earned Value Management. Next, from Boeing, we have Bob Patty, who also chairs the National Defense Industrial Association. And finally, Greg Key from the Reserve Component Automation System Program Management Office, here to provide the automated information system point of view. Thank you all for being here. Before we get started, let me add a personal note. Your host from our last broadcast on CAVE is in the hospital today. At first, I thought this job was just too difficult for him, but I understand he's having elective surgery. Joe, get well, buddy. Now let's get started. We'll begin with a short introduction to the history and philosophy of Earned Value Management. If you do have questions, jot them down so that you can phone them in during our live question and answer period.
Connection established. In 1996, the Undersecretary of Defense, Acquisition, and Technology presented the first Acquisition Excellence Award to the Department of the Navy and an industry team made up of McDonnell Douglas Aerospace, Northrop, and General Electric aircraft engines for their work on developing the FA-18 EF program. Incoming transmission.
I think the F-18 program was genuinely unique in many areas. Like many things, perhaps an accident in time brought a lot of tools together. To mention just a few, the most profound probably was the advent of integrated program teams, bringing together people from multiple disciplines and approaching a program from that perspective, vice a previous, more functionally oriented approach. Acquisition reform was just beginning, and it made real differences. Other things that made a difference, agreeing to manage in partnership with our prime contractor and the major subs, rather than in competition for information. We agreed to share information, to manage to one set of books, if you will. It took an awful lot of trust to start down this path, but it was done successfully. We hope because of the F-18 success that others will have an opportunity to launch off on this same path. We believe it works.
And Atlanta, Houston, let's reconfigure back to normal air to grounds.
The story of Earned Value Management, or EVM, began long before its successful role in the development of the FA-18 EF. In fact, the EVM approach to project management started in the 60s as a response to the challenges inherent in risky, cost-based, rapid response contracts that involve complex technology. After several decades of transition and change, earned value management is once again being embraced as the most effective tool for managing such contracts.
Level 1. Authorized. Accessing. Database.
The best way to understand how earned value management can play a role in creating a successful program is to understand the concepts of both earned value and earned value management. Earned value is a method for determining the amount of work performed during a period of time. This measurement uses the planned resource cost of a task as its value and earns this value by completing the task. By comparing the earned value to the actual cost incurred, you can determine the over or underspending for the work accomplished. In this example, the cost of labor for 4 40-hour weeks at a rate of $30 per hour totals $4,800. An indirect or overhead cost of $5,200 brings the total to an even $10,000. Therefore, the resource plan for this specific task should calculate in cost to 10 by the end of the month. If the work is only half done, then the earned value would be 1/2 of 10, or 5. If you then calculate the money spent for the same month as 7, the project is 40% over budget for the amount of work accomplished. Earned value management employs this earned value approach in an integrated program management process. The key elements of the EVM approach are working level responsibility embodied in the integrated product teams, or IPTs, integrated planning, and objective performance evaluation. Working level responsibility places the emphasis on members of the IPTs as responsible for the total management of their tasks. Integrated planning involves a work task definition that allocates the work to tasks without duplication, a schedule that defines how long tasks should take, as well as the relationship between the tasks, an allocation of resources that calculates both staffing requirements and costs, an overall integration that determines the methodology for computing earned value, and finally, the development of an objective performance assessment. This assessment creates a numeric baseline for measuring program performance and summarizes the assumptions, conditions, and expectations of the program. Together, these elements contribute to a proactive management process that identifies problems before they happen by effectively integrating cost, schedule, and technical performance objectives with risk management.
Level 2. Authorized. Incoming. Transmission.
In the mid to late 1950s, the Department of Defense changed their mode of operating and the way they were going to manage programs. And we created a System Program Office, or a SPO. And for the first time, one single organization was given primary responsibility for all of the aspects of weapon systems management. And all of the services went to this concept throughout the Department of Defense. The problem was there was no management system available at the time for the program managers to use to tie all of this very complicated process together. Computers then were not what they are today, and the whole thing was done by hand. One of the early techniques that we came upon was PERT time, which was a networking technique which permitted us to take the major events in a program, tie them together in a sequential or parallel basis, depending on how they are sequenced, and we were able then to calculate a critical path. The PERT time concept really came from catalytic construction. It came from industry. They used it in large construction projects for chemical plants, and it was adopted by the Department of Defense. We used it in the Air Force very successfully on the C-141 program, where I had that particular responsibility, and I know the Navy used it on the Polaris program, the Fleet Ballistic Missile program. That was so successful in the applications where it was used properly that the DoD then went to a concept they call per cost. The roots is basically industry. The roots of earned value is basically from industry. The whole networking technique that we started with came from industry. We adapted it to large defense programs.
The evolution of EVM as an effective way to manage began with the emergence of large, complex programs such as the Navy's Polaris program and the Air Force's Minuteman missile system. Although the PERT cost technique used for the Polaris program was an effective system, its numerous variations and prescriptive nature made it too complex for universal use. The Air Force approach was based on best practices used by American industry and involved brief statements of attributes that the contractor's management systems had to meet. Instead of telling a contractor how to manage, this technique defined the minimum requirements of an acceptable system. Eventually, the Air Force used this approach to write a cost schedule specification. By 1967, the Air Force specification evolved into the DoD Cost Schedule Control Systems Criteria, or CSCSC.
Drafted the first specification for cost planning control systems. That was CSPCS, and it was shortened to CSPEC, and that's where that acronym came from originally. Well, over the years, that was embellished somewhat, primarily for clarification purposes, but the basic criteria ultimately stayed the same. The idea of a criteria and the requirements document is I think, stood the test of time. What happened was the implementation went bad, and we became enamored of the technique, and we got involved with a kind of a cult built up on this. We took 5 areas of the criteria and blew them up into 30 or 40 specific types of criteria themselves, and that was never the intent. Those criteria are pretty much the same as when they were written. There's some wording has been changed for clarification, but the basic criteria are exactly the same.
Accessing database.
The CSCS criteria were organized under 5 basic management principles: organization and integration of people and work, planning and budgeting, accounting, analysis, and revisions. During the 70s and 80s, what had started as broad guidelines incorporating these 5 principles ballooned into something very different. Rules and regulations replaced flexibility and judgment. By 1987, the DoD Implementation Guide had grown to 102 pages. Although many contractors improved their cost and schedule management control systems during this time, others did only the minimum work expected, producing cost and schedule performance reports that project managers never saw or reviewed. The result? Cost overruns and a growing distrust of CSCSC as a management system.
Level 3. Authorized. Accessing database.
30 years after its initial introduction, EVM has been reinvented as a valuable and useful tool whose primary purpose is to support program management. This change could not have happened without the support of industry. In fact, a total quality management study conducted in 1991 advanced both government-industry cooperation and the evolution of EVM as a program management tool.
A few enterprises engage in activities of the scope and complexity associated with weapon system development programs. Therefore, DoD has an advocacy role for any management practices which are proven to be effective in application. We have 30 years of experience in applying earned value management principles, which have evolved to a state of acceptance as effective tools for managing any complex program. Our responsibility is to share the knowledge gained from our experience with practitioners in government and industry.
In fact, industry has issued its own guidelines for earned value management systems. Recast for both government and commercial application, the basic concepts of these tools are Plan all work scope from the beginning of the program to completion. Integrate program work scope, schedule, and cost objectives into a baseline plan against which accomplishments can be measured. Objectively assess accomplishments at the work performance level. Analyze significant variances from the plan and forecast impacts. Provide data to higher levels for management decision-making and implementation of management actions. Ultimately, these guidelines are flexible, letting companies tailor their system to a specific program, while making them accountable for meeting the program's cost, schedule, and technical performance objectives.
Incoming transmission.
The Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Technology has asked the Defense Contract Management Command to act as the single face to industry for earned value management. We can help the government move from a compliance-based system to a system based on industry standards. Part of this is also to move us from a financial management focus in earned value towards project management, and that we should succeed by using this industry standard as the method for us in the Department of Defense.
The change from CS Square to EVMS isn't a question of responsibility shift. It's a question of acceptance of fundamental management principles. When we enter into contracts, government and industry have mutual responsibilities for applying integrated management discipline in planning and executing programs. The distinguishing difference between EVMS and CS is a movement from a reporting mechanism imposed by government to a management discipline embraced by industry. Inherent in that change is the sharing of knowledge between team members, which makes reporting secondary in importance to objective problem solving. EVM provides a framework for common understanding of schedule cost and technical performance, making it an invaluable risk management mechanism.
Most recently, the story of EVM has come full circle. As private industry increasingly begins to appreciate and adopt EVM practices, and as the government continues to couple EVM principles with integrated product teams, cost as an independent variable, and performance-based contracting, the benefits continue to multiply for government, industry, and the American taxpayer.
Let's go to our first question. I'd like to ask Dave Musio, please explain how EVM supports management reform legislation. Aren't we supposed to use commercial practices?
Yes, EVM supports our management reform in the fact that we have the Government Performance and Results Act, which requires the government to set strategic goals and objectives. And when we buy major systems, they have to support those goals and objectives. You need a management system that provides visibility into the achievement of goals and objectives so that those can be tied in with budget estimates and tied into our management objectives. So we found it as a perfect system to do that connection and that integration.
Thanks. Bob, does industry plan to apply EVM to product-focused work at facilities for both defense and commercial work?
Yes, in some aspects of it, whether it's called earned value management or whether it's called just good business practices, the intent is to use good business practices where EVMS is a way of the choice of the business principles. And so we'll look at it probably maybe at a different level, and we may not report it quite the same, but it's still using those good business practices. And that's where I think that the commonality is rather than in a specific title of EVMS.
We have a question from our audience. Go ahead.
Hello, I'm Marilyn McCauley from the Federal Aviation Administration and also president of the Performance Management Association. I would like to ask for you to explain what DCMC's role is as the DoD executive agent for earned value management, and also if you envision working with the civilian agencies in the future as they come on board with earned value management.
Yes, right.
Jill, why don't you go ahead and start
Yes,
with
I can answer that. Let me refer to a couple of things that were in the tape to just kind of repeat those. You heard in the video about the application of earned value to a particular program, that was the F-18. You heard about earned value as a system thing, and it is true that you do need some plant-wide things in the contractor's facility that support the application of earned value on particular programs. And then you heard about the fact that earned value, or what it used to be called CS over the years, it kind of became disjointed from its original intention, and it became, I think the industry term was over-implemented. So what we're trying to do now is to kind of go back to the original intent, which is that contractors have good management systems, and those management systems are applied in the programs that the government is buying, and we jointly use that information to manage. And what DCMC has been asked to do is to help contractors make that transition from the way we used to do it, or the way we used to over-implement it, to the new way we want to do it now, which is the management systems that the contractor has are used throughout the plant for our programs and for their own programs, and you heard a discussion of that already. And DCMC has been tasked to try to make that happen, and we are. We also have been tasked under our executive agent responsibility with putting out some common guidance for implementation throughout DoD, and we have done that, and we will continue to keep that guidance current.
Thanks, Jill. We've seen a lot in the films about application of EVM to hardware. We need to think about software too, and we haven't had a chance to hear from Greg yet. Greg, I'd like to ask you a question. Software development is different from hardware. So how can we use techniques like EVM in the software area?
Well, Rick, the software development is different than hardware, but the principles are basically the same in terms of management. You're still interested in a good performance measurement baseline to measure against, to have to measure progress against, to measure changes against as you move forward there. So that baseline is critical, and earned value management provides that framework for establishing that. If you don't have those principles in place and are not practicing that, you have the potential of a rubber baseline, and programs tend to go over cost and behind schedule when doing that. There's a lot of different development methods out there: rapid prototyping, object-oriented, and waterfall, and spiral, and you'll hear a whole slew of those. But it's all critical that you measure progress against that and have some type of baseline to measure where you're going with each of those and handling changes. I guess the one thing I would say is that with any technique, earned value management is not a silver bullet to answering all of your problems. It won't replace management in trying to answer those, and it will not make decisions for you. So it's a management tool. You need to tailor it as you implement it, and as you do so and get the proper data out, it'll support you in your analysis there.
Let's go to a fax question that we received from Bill Jennison of NavAir. And Bill asks, how does industry make the cultural change that's required to apply EVM? Bob, why don't you take a stab at that?
Okay, I'll, as I say, take a stab at it. I'm not certain I've got all the answers in terms of the cultural change. Cultural change is slow, something that you need to continue working on. And I think that across the various companies in industry, we've looked at different ways of approaching this, some very effective in areas, some are not quite as effective. It really needs top management understanding and using the tools to do their management, to get the analysis out for the program managers to day-to-day live good business practices and bring it down from the top. The people on the floor need to be able to use the good business principles and apply it, and just keep working, keep the visibility up and keep working on it. And there'll always be a few gaps here and there, and you just need to keep working on them, and that's really the key to it, is just trying to get them all moving in the same direction. I think that industry's not alone. I think we see that same thing in various customers that we have also. It's a big change, but we just need to keep at it.
Thanks, Bob. We have a phone call from Alexandria, Virginia. Go ahead, Alexandria.
Oh, Rick, hi. This is Dave Balfour at Headquarters AMC. My question is, discuss the relationships between EVM and progress payments on fixed-price contracts.
Okay, who wants to take that? Jill, you want to take a stab at that one?
Okay, I'll try on this one. EVM is not required on contracts that have progress payments. If you look at the criteria for when EVM is applied contractually on contracts, it wouldn't cover the situations where you would be using progress payments. Now, having said that, when the government does pay progress payments, they do want to make sure that when we're making a payment, there is progress commensurate with the money that we're paying out. So you can say that the principles, if you will, of, the payment has to be earned, if you will, under progress payments, and the payment has to be commensurate with what's been incurred. That principle applies under progress payments, but you won't find the contractual requirement for EVM in the same contract as you would find a contractual allowance for progress payments.
Dave, go ahead.
Let me talk about that a minute. In the OMB guidance that we've put out under the capital programming process in OMB Circular A11, we have said in there that agencies should use earned value on fixed price contracts. And the reason for that is that large acquisitions affect the agency's ability to meet strategic goals and objectives. And we need a mechanism, a management mechanism, to assure that we are able to achieve all the three goals: cost, schedule, and performance. As many of you know, if you've been in large fixed price contracts, at times we tend to trade off performance to stay within the cost parameters. And we need to watch all three of those goals. So OMB will have to put together an interagency team to look at how we should implement earned value on fixed price contracts, but we think it's very essential that we do.
Thanks, Dave. Let's go to a question from our audience. Go ahead.
Thank you, Rick. My name is Mick Pratt. I'm from the Software Project Managers Network. I'm curious to know of Mr. Musio, how does the OMB use earned value information during agency budget reviews?
When the agencies submit their budgets for new programs, they're required to give us their analysis of how they came up with it, what their program management process is going to be, and what kind of a measurement system they will use to track progress on this project as it's implemented. As you know, agencies have to give us in the budget process, they have to commit to cost, schedule, and performance goals, and under the requirements of Federal Acquisition Regulation Title V, agencies to achieve at least 90% of those original baseline goals. So as part of the process in the approval of funding of a new acquisition, the agency has to say how they're going to manage it. Once that program's in process, then the earned value reports have to be provided in each annual budget submission to show the OMB examiners that the program is or is not within goals, and if it's not, how far the deviation is and what are the corrective actions. So that while earned value is primarily an agency management tool and a program manager's tool to manage the program, in the budgeting process we need that information also to see if the budgets are going to be held to what we initially thought they would be. Earned value management allows us to have a significant, more disciplined process in our budgeting.
Thanks, Dave. I understand we have a call from Salt Lake City. Go ahead, Salt Lake.
Yes, this is Richard Young. I'm with CEO Sciences. And the question I wondered about is how risk analysis and risk management are handled or integrated with EVMS.
Greg, you want to take that?
Yeah, we actually have implemented an integrated program management approach, which encompasses not only risk, EVM metrics and results analysis that comes out of that, metrics, and take that whole process and take all of those products and integrate them together to give program managers a single viewpoint of what's really happening with the program. So it's an integral part because you focus the risks on and the risk management on a lot of the critical elements, and you're checking on that out of your earned value metrics as well and data that's coming out.
Thanks. Anyone else?
Rick, I'll
Go ahead, Bob.
take a piece of that. In terms of the IBR, the Integrated Baseline Review, as you set up the beginning of a contract, one of the things you're looking at is how well you understand what the statement of work is, the task, the technical task you have, what the plans are, but you're also looking at what are the risks, and that's looking at it from the program manager standpoint, from both the customer and from the contractor. And as you go through those, understanding those various pieces, you find the risks that are there, if there is a high risk, low risk, and proceed through your planning of that contract. And I think that at that particular stage, you're identifying risks, and then it's the tool that you want to use as you proceed on down the contract to make sure that you're identifying you and working those risks off.
Rick, let me add to that. Again, in our budgeting concepts, risk is very important. In the past, agencies have tended to give us the most optimistic cost for a particular program when they came in through the budget, make sure that it was approved. The new policies that have been issued say to agencies, you have to give us the most likely number in the budgeting process, and that's the number with the risk included in your total cost estimate. So if you think that if everything went properly, the most optimistic cost would say be $1 billion, but you had significant risk, then you need to come in through the budget process with a higher number, say $1.2 billion or whatever. That program then has to be approved compared to other programs on that higher number of that risk assessment as to what the program is most likely to cost, because that gives us the ability to discipline the budget.
I understand we have a call from Denver who's holding. Go ahead, Denver.
Yes, hi. I'm calling from General Services Administration, and I'd like to know, your speakers indicated that guidance has been issued by both DoD and industry on using EVM. Can you tell me how to obtain copies of such guidance from both groups?
Well, let's ask Jill about the government part.
Well, there's a couple of things. There are changes to the DoD FAR supplement that change what had been the cost schedule control system criteria clauses. Those are out. If you don't have them, I don't know, how do I give out my number for them to call me? You can call DCMC, and if you leave your number with someone, we'll get back to you and get that. There's also information on the DCMC homepage that we have put out to our own folks. What we have is a whole kit that contains the whole history, it contains guidance, it contains the clauses, and it'll tell you basically what we told our field people, contractors, and our customers about the changes in EVMS and how we were going to go about this. So those are two vehicles that will give you information on that. And there is also an OSD homepage, right? We'll have to get the address for that, and maybe we can flash it up on the screen. And that's another source of information, and that will give you all the information also.
And your homepage address is?
I knew you'd ask me that. Give me a minute, and I'll.
Well, we will have
get
some.
It and write it down. Yeah.
We will have some addresses for everyone at the end of the broadcast, and they'll be on the screen at the end of the broadcast.
I'd like to answer also on the industry guidelines are available in the OSD webpage as we update, as we look at and working toward the common guidelines. They are out there along with some of the things that Jill was talking about in terms of the DCMC guidelines. So that's a good page to kind of pick all of the pieces up at one time.
Thank you. We have a question from the audience. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. My name is Joe Hauser from Lockheed Martin. I have a follow-up question on a previous question that was asked. Does industry plan to take these guidelines and make them into an industry standard or an ISO standard?
Bob, how about it?
It seemed like we got a loaded audience here, but that's not really. One of the things in terms of the guidelines that I was just mentioning, the guidelines to EVMS written by the Management System Subcommittee of the NDIA that I'm chairman of, that group put together these guidelines. They were accepted by OSD and DCMC. We are proceeding currently in terms of getting a vote on them for an ANSI standard, American standard, as guidelines, as a basis for good business principles and to be flexible. Are we moving toward a larger standard, an international standard, an ISO standard, something of that nature? The jury's still out. We're still working that one. There is a global standards group that we're working on to determine what is the right overall direction. The really intent is that they're good business practices. It really is beneficial for a company to use the guidelines, and I think that we all benefit that way.
Thanks, Bob. We have a call holding from St. Louis. Go ahead, St. Louis.
Yes, I'm calling from Boeing here in St. Louis, and I was wanting to find out in terms of the risk assessment, will that become more of a requirement on future programs in terms of determining progress?
Who'd like to try that one?
I can start on that one. Yeah, the risk assessment is a requirement to come in with the initial budget submission on a project. In other words, the agency comes in and says, here's how this project meets strategic goals and objectives, here's our analysis, here's the various alternatives we looked at, here's why we chose this particular project, and here's the risk assessment that says we can meet the goals that we have submitted. Because basically we're looking for agencies and contractors, of course, to be able to achieve at least 90% of those original baseline goals that they come in with. So the risk assessment for OMB is very important. We also ask for a probability analysis that says what is the probability of achieving those baseline cost, schedule, and performance goals. So it's part of the budget analysis of these programs.
In DOD, for individual programs and contracts, the risk is supposed to be addressed in the integrated baseline review, which you heard discussed already. And at that point, the contractor, the government, is supposed to sit down in an IPT fashion and say, what are the risks that are going to happen, that we think are in this program? How are we going to minimize them? And then as part of the IBR, they also make sure, as was said, everybody understands what's going on, and they can kind of walk off together in an integrated fashion from then on. But that is an inherent part of the IBR, is to address the risks.
It's also, I think, an important part of the information systems, in the especially for MASARC systems in that side of the house. It is a required element of the MASARC quarterly report that you submit up for systems as well, and it's addressed there. And I think it's important that risk be continually addressed and not go stale, because that's what's going to kill you on the program as you move down the road, and especially watching the metrics.
We have a fax that I'd like to go to now from Ted Rogers, and Ted sends us this question. It's my understanding that the pre-approved waiver criteria for systems changes through the SPI requires a contractor to apply earned value to all product-focused contracts, both government and commercial. Is this your understanding?
I guess
Jill?
that's my question.
I guess
right?
so.
Okay, let me explain a few things. We talked a little bit about earned value being a set of best business practices, a management system, and that management system is supposed to be used throughout the facility on all the work that's there. That was the whole idea of this transition to EVMS, and it is a response to industry complaints that you, the government, were making us have a separate system to report up CS stuff, and that wasn't the system we were using to manage, okay? So this whole transition thing, and the whole reason we're doing all this, is to have a system-wide thing within a facility that then gets applied to the programs that are in there. When you look at Single Process Initiative, SPI, again, SPI is a tool that helps contractors move to a single plant-wide process on all the government work that's there, all the government work that requires something. So if you're asking, do we want EVM to be used on all the programs that are in that facility, the answer is yes. That's the whole intent of EVMS, and that's the whole intent of SPI, is to help contractors move to that kind of plant-wide thing.
Go ahead.
I'd like to add to that. I think really what we're saying is that we want to have the contractors have good business practices. And I think EVMS, if you think of it in the terms of a management process, then yes, the intent is to have as much commonality between all the business within a contractor's facility. Is it going to be used the same? Is it going to be used across every piece of the contract, every small contract, this type of thing? Probably not applied the same way, but the intent is that we use good business practice. And EVMS are principles, guidelines for good business practice. So in that sense, yes, I think we do follow it.
Greg?
And I think that's critical on the government side as well. If you don't have that emphasis from the top down on the government side as well as on the contractor side, and have that collaboration between government and industry, it will not be a success when you implement it. So the emphasis needs to be there jointly.
Let's go to a question from our audience. Go ahead.
Hi, John Moore with the Software Program Managers Network. I have a follow-up question for Mr. Key. It seems like software projects seem to have a particular problem of implementing earned value, and I'm wondering if percent complete is the only criteria that people can use for managing projects using earned value.
I don't believe that's the only method you can use. I think as you go through and get prepared for an IBR in which you go through and validate the performance measurement baseline, that's the point that you go through and take a look at what the work is being planned there, what type of work is it, and how you can measure it. So percent complete might be one method that you might use. There might be some efforts that might be partly level of effort and using any number of the different techniques there. So I don't believe that's the only approach, but you need to look at it and validate it as you go through and implement your performance measurement baseline.
Anything else? One of the first questions that we received from the audience asked about civilian agencies. Jill, we didn't really address that.
Yes.
Would you like to go back and do that?
Yes, I would. Yeah, I apologize that I didn't answer that at the beginning. The question had to do with how is DCMC going to work with civilian agencies and draw civilian agencies into this as we work through this. We've got two ways we're doing that. First, DCMC in its executive agent role has set up kind of an interagency IPT, and the idea is for us to be able to share information, best practices, lessons learned, and to make sure that guidance that we put out is coordinated with all the activities so that we're kind of all in sync. And the whole idea is for us all to be, joining hands and walking off into the sunset in a consistent manner here. That group does have civilian agency representation on it, and if there is a particular civilian agency who doesn't know about it, it's called the PMAC. Please do contact me and we will get you on it, but we do have civilian agencies represented on it right now. DCMC, in connection with its normal role of administering contracts, also does work for civilian agencies. We're obviously free to DOD because we are a DOD activity, and we do work for civilian agencies on a reimbursable basis, and we're already doing work for NASA, FAA, and a number of other civilian agencies, and we'd be thrilled to do earned value work for civilian agencies also.
Thanks, Jill. Luckily, it's your day today, because I have a fax question I'd like to give you from Jim Henderson. In line with Gary Crystal's model program approach for implementation of earned value, has DCMC incorporated buying activity assistance visits in joint surveillance agreements to ensure participation of the customer in this process?
Okay, let me talk a little bit about this joint surveillance thing. I think as part of acquisition reform, you've probably heard the term oversight to insight, and don't interfere with the contractor's management of things. Let the contractor manage, let the contractor bring to the table what it is that we want. That kind of language. It applies to earned value too. So the idea is not to go in there and kind of beat up a contractor to comply with whatever it is we say we want in earned value. The idea is to have something that's done jointly. And what DCMC has done is say, okay, well, we probably need to do some surveillance there, but what we want to do is do it in a joint fashion with the contractor. There's a variety of ways to do joint surveillance. We could take turns doing things, or we can say, you the contractor look at this, we'll look at this, or we could actually join hands and look at something together. The ultimate goal is to actually have the contractor do the surveillance themselves, and we would use the data coming out of that. But right now we are doing joint surveillance, and all our offices have set up agreements with contractors to do that. Buying activities are not precluded from participating in them. We do not, at the moment, require that a buying activity participate. We still need to continue with our role in surveillance, and so what I wouldn't want is for us to be not doing the surveillance while we wait for someone to show up, but certainly any buying activity who wants to participate in that thing is more than welcome to participate in. We've never turned down anybody to participate in it. One other avenue we have for having buying activity involvement in anything we do in a particular facility, including earned value, is what we call a management council. It's a group of senior people from the contractor, from DCMC, from DCAA, and from our major customer locations. And they meet on a regular basis, and they talk about issues at that facility, and earned value is one of the issues that they are working. And that's probably the best way for a customer to have an input to system-wide issues on earned value. But again, they are not precluded from participating in the joint surveillance, and we would love to have them if they wish to do that.
Yeah, from an implementation perspective, we actually do get that participation, and it's been very value added. We get the participation at the IVRs as well, from DCMC as well. So that's been a very joint collaborative effort, at least on the RCAS program, and a success.
Rick, we have a lot of different sites within the industry at different contractors, and I think it varies because some of them openly invite the buying office in, some it's not quite as evident, but in some of the reviewing processes of joint surveillance, we do see that on a more frequent case than we've seen in the past, with the buying offices either asking or being asked to come in to the contractor site. So we're seeing more of it, I think, in industry, though it's not a widespread necessarily at this time.
We have a question from the floor.
Yes. Hi. My name is Mike Valenti from the Crusader Project Office within the Army. I have a question for Mr. Patty. Mr. Patty, earned value has traditionally been used on cost-plus type contracts where the cost and schedule risks are, for the most part, borne by the customer. However, on fixed-price contracts, those risks rests quite firmly on the shoulders of the contractor to a large degree. Earned value management has not traditionally typically been used on fixed-price contracts, and I was wondering what your thoughts are on the use of earned value management in a fixed-price contracting arrangement.
Okay, and I would say that in many cases on fixed-price contracts, we will see good business practice, good EVMS application. Probably not see the reporting requirement that's a side issue, my feeling, as an output of an EVMS, but the good business practice, the techniques within EVMS will be used to some level, I think, in most cases at the firm fixed price contract, because our management is just as interested in understanding what the true costs are, what the risks are, and being able to manage as a customer from outside the company. And so I think we'll see that, but not necessarily at the same level. We'll do it as applicable to the kind of contract, how the management is put together to understand the problems. So the data is there, it's available. The reporting probably is different. The reporting process is different.
But you're using the processes and the disciplines in your day-to-day management is what
I would say that in many of the companies, yes. In all companies, probably not necessarily the case, but the ones that I'm familiar with in the defense, the aerospace side of it, I'd say that some of them are using it, some of them are not using it.
Thank you.
Well, those are good questions. We've had a good interchange, but at this point, we're going to take a short break. Please use some of this time to make sure your site is checked in with us. The phone and fax numbers will be on the screen during the break. Before we go, I'd like to thank the members of our first panel for joining us today. Dave Musio, Jill Pettibone, Bob Patty, and Greg Key. Audience, let's give them a round of applause. When we return, we'll watch a series of case studies on how EVM has been used effectively in different programs. Then we'll join a new panel of our studio audience for a follow-up discussion on these case studies, and we'll talk about how EVM principles can be incorporated into your programs. We'll also be answering your calling questions. We'll see you in 12 minutes. During this portion of our broadcast, we're going to watch a series of EVM case studies. Then, with your phone-in participation and the participation of our studio audience, we'll discuss how EVM can be implemented in your programs. For this discussion, we've brought on a new panel of experts who have experience implementing EVM. On my far right, we have Kevin Fahey, the Deputy Program Manager for the Army's Crusader program. Next, Captain Dave Fitch, Program Manager for the Navy's MIDS program. On my left is Lieutenant Colonel Frank Selgeko, Program Manager for the Air Force JPATS program. And finally, we have Chris Scalise, an EOS-AM Program Manager for NASA. Thank you all for being with us today. Now that we have a sense of where EVM came from and how it works, let's take a look at how EVM practices are being used effectively in several current programs.
As greater technology is developed, our universe expands with opportunities. At the same time, our world on Earth shrinks into one global economic and communications community. Computers, satellites, and cable television have all contributed to this advancement because they supply integrated user services to the international community. To date, telephone technology has lagged behind other communications because integrated service seemed impossible. A different service provider in nearly every city, state, and country, with only sporadic compatibility between providers. The Iridium program has changed everything. By June of 1998, the world will have its first global wired and wireless communications network. We are talking about one phone number and one bill, no matter where you stand on the globe when you make or receive a call.
The Iridium system operates with 66 interconnected satellites. As these satellites orbit the Earth, they'll provide worldwide communication coverage. Each satellite is in contact with strategically placed ground stations around the world. The ground stations link the satellite constellation to the public switch telephone network here on Earth.
Iridium is the first system to combine both wired and wireless telephone users into the same communications network. This groundbreaking system was merely a concept in 1989, and by 1993, it was a commercially funded project. Motorola Space and Systems Technology Group and Iridium Limited Liability Corporation began the overwhelming development process.
In my judgment, the major contribution of earned value is the benefit that the discipline brings to the planning process. By having project teams use earned value methods to plan their programs, variances that could result from inadequate planning can be reduced. In this respect, earned value is an extension of sound quality principles. Quality principles, as you know, seek to reduce or eliminate variances at the source.
As a program management tool, earned value was effective in maintaining strict controls without restricting creativity and consensus. EVM principles were also easily modified to meet the specific demands faced by Iridium.
You first need to understand the scope of the task. The Iridium satellite program schedule required delivery of a qualified bus 18 months following contract signing with the bus partner. Further, the production program required delivery of flight buses at an unprecedented rate of 1 unit per week. This aggressive schedule drove the need for a focused approach to understanding all critical issues associated with the development and production progress.
As a commercial program, we had the freedom to decide what project management strategies to use. We decided on 3 basic strategies. First, for speed and quality, we procured subsystem elements from the best commercial sources. This meant subcontracting for satellite buses, satellite antennas, launch services, and other major parts. Second, we developed a detailed project schedule to be used and integrated amongst Motorola, our customer, and our major subcontractors around the world. And third, we tailored a number of project and risk management tools, including earned value principles, to the needs of the program.
Program developers knew from experience that consensus among contractors was key in achieving commitment to a schedule. As a result of this understanding, EVM principles were tailored to control variance among the major contractors of the space segment of the system. Variance in price was not the issue, since prices were fixed. However, providing indicators of progress in schedule was a high priority for the Space and Systems Technology Group.
Together with the subcontractors, we devised a number of incremental monthly payment milestones. Measurement of these milestones was selected as part of negotiation. With payment linked to milestone completion, we found that subcontractors were proactive in correcting variances, since cash flow would be impacted if milestones were not met.
Each month, the supplier reported both schedule status and work performed as a function of work planned. This process, coupled with the incremental milestone payment approach, provided significant insight and control of the Iridium bus program.
Hello.
How you doing? We got this letter in from the bus supplier yesterday, and
the challenge of setting up this project control system led us to develop a suite of tools which we tailored to meet our specific needs. Earned value management techniques were an important component of our approach, along with a fully integrated program schedule, critical path analysis, schedule probability analysis, and progress metrics. As the program has progressed, we have adapted our approach to integrate key metrics into the earned value process as a method for measuring progress. This serves to both capitalize on existing objective measures as well as to bond the earned value process closer to the development process. The planning and controls effort on Iridium has been critical in keeping the program on track, and earned value techniques have played a key role in measuring work performance and progress across the entire Iridium program.
By all standards, Iridium is on track, maintaining scope, schedule, and resources, and has become a model for ideal project planning and management. Over half of the necessary satellite constellation is currently in orbit.
The Iridium system is our customers' first business. They depend on the system's availability to earn revenue. And the system's investors and shareholders depend on this revenue to produce a return on their investment. Therefore, our commitment to meeting schedule and milestones are fundamental to our customer and investor satisfaction. As we evaluate the situation here in October of 1997, it's my belief that a sound program management strategy, including the use of earned value concepts, has contributed significantly to the Iridium program's success.
Since the beginning of time, we have been enamored with flight. From simple wings to technological wonders, aviation has endured countless setbacks and successes. But with each success, we always asked for more. And with each innovation, we saw escalating budgets and bigger management challenges. All this ended with the FA-18EF Super Hornet.
One of the things that we encountered when we started the Super Hornet program was that we had a tremendous amount of skepticism coming out of the nation's capital, whether it was the Pentagon or the Navy or actually Capitol Hill. We were coming off collectively off an A-12 program which had been unsuccessful. So when we looked at this program, we knew that we had to put in place some management processes that would ensure that we were able to manage this program successfully. So while previous programs had obviously been managed, it had kind of been up to each program manager to figure out how to do that. What we took on in this particular program was to identify the right way to manage a program, identify those processes, and then run the program by the processes across the board. Our customer, ourselves, our major suppliers, everyone aligned with those common set of processes.
I think good things happen because a lot of people want them to. And in the F-18 program, we had to succeed. It was important to the Navy, the nation, and critically important to naval aviation. It was also important to the company. We had had problems in the past in delivering the full promise on a major tactical aviation acquisition program, and the F-18EF brought forward an opportunity to do it right, and to do it right at a critical point in time.
We chose to leverage off of the CS system, which, as most of us know, was a government-mandated reporting system. We knew when we started the program that that system was rather bureaucratic and cumbersome, but most importantly was latent in terms of providing information. So it was a good reporting tool, but it was not a tool that was easily used to manage because the data came far too long after the action. So we chose to leverage our processes off of the CS system into a weekly earned value system. We chose weekly because, again, for currency of information, we wanted our team leaders to have the information that resulted from their actions as quickly as they possibly could. So we closed out the week on Sunday, and by Wednesday morning at 6 a.m., team leaders had their current cost and schedule performance through the previous Sunday, and easily allowed them to see the results of their action and to take the next set of actions to ensure that the program stayed on track.
Earned value is important to us every week. By that I mean it's incredibly hard to find leading indicators in our business. You really can't find many things that predict the future. But what was done on the F-18EF program was to reduce the cycle time of information, to really get a firm handle on cost, on schedule, and on performance, and to look at it and analyze it every week. While it wasn't a leading indicator, it was a trailing indicator with such a short cycle time that we were able to attack problems while they were small. We say kill snakes while they were youngins.
When the FA-18EF program was started, a decision was made to reinforce the management process with a fast, paperless, and rapid reaction set of data that would be available to not only the team leaders, but to all.
We go back to the beginning of this program to talk about how earned value was applied. And I think one of our major successes in getting earned value off to a good start were these preliminary meetings that we had to discuss the reporting, types of reporting, levels of reporting that we were going to do. In the past, we had seen where we had let the reporting actually determine the appropriateness of where we were going to manage the program.
Yes, yes. And that applies, to the CD as well.
Technical people find detailed planning extremely difficult. They don't like to do it. It's hard to do, but it's absolutely essential that you take that first step and put together the detailed plan. By having that plan put together, it allows all the different teams, hundreds of teams, to count on and put together an integrated plan. We know that the plan is going to have some deviations to it. We don't know all the details ahead of us, but if we don't force ourselves to go through that process, it is that learning process of putting the plan together where you find lots of things that you never find if you don't attack it at a detailed level.
Other things that made a difference, agreeing to manage in partnership with our prime contractor and the major subs rather than in competition for information. We agreed to share information, to manage to one set of books, if you will. It took an awful lot of trust to start down this path, but it was done successfully.
We chose to do it through kind of a digital bulletin board, if you will, where the data was available for team leaders, as I said, very quickly, but also the data was available at various levels of the organization and available to all.
We must remember that earned value management is a tool of program managers. In the past, some of our mistakes may have been that EVMS, or earned value management, kind of took on a life of its own, and it was viewed outside of the IPT process. Okay, for earned value management to be a success, it must be a tool of the program manager, and as such, integrated with all of his other tools. So it's very, very important that happen, and the success lies in how you do that.
Using the appropriate tools correctly and teaming with contractors who share a management style based in teamwork and communication creates a joint effort that makes for a successful program.
You know, when you put a plan together and the data is telling you that you're a little bit behind cost or a little bit behind schedule, and you get that data every week, and the system encourages you to talk about that and to get help from your teammates and from management to go solve these problems, inherent in there is the key to success. And when you have the customer being a part of that culture, as opposed to a standoff, this is your job, make it work. Because good solutions come from customers and suppliers deciding on how to go forward.
The teaming that went on throughout the Naval Air Systems Command, with McDonnell Douglas, with Hughes, with General Electric, with Northrop Grumman, was truly an exciting thing to participate in. It was the essence of a shared vision. We all knew where we were, we knew where we had to go, we knew the resources that we had to expend to get there. And people were able to come to work every day with that vision and the realization of it fixed in their mind, and to go forward and deliver on
it. The contractor taking ownership of the EVMS system or process on the F-18 program, I believe, was a significant role for him to take, and made significant contributions, if you will, to the success of the program. By that, what I mean is that by his taking ownership, he now assured himself that he had good, accurate information. A contractor, like anyone else, cannot operate if the information that they receive is not good information.
Every program manager wakes up in the morning and wants to know where he stands with cost, with schedule, and with performance. Earned value is a great tool to help you answer the bell every day with regard to where you stand.
So when you have the systems in place and you have this open communication culture sitting on top of it, you got the keys for a successful program. And this program absolutely demonstrates that. It's ahead of schedule, it's under cost, it's meeting its technical objectives. It is absolutely a model program and has been so recognized by the Defense Department.
As the world is becoming smaller, the global cooperation between countries and companies in different countries is increasing.
The issues of cost and schedule are universal issues for project management.
Earned value management has been part of defense acquisition for more than 3 decades. Over that time, EVM has proven itself as a sound business tool, consistent with acquisition reform and essential to improving the planning and execution of projects of all types and scopes. As earned value management has evolved in the United States, it's attracted interest from other countries.
We were first exposed to earned value management probably back in the early 1980s, when we were working with the United States Navy on the FFG project. In 1986, the really decisive point was a report from our Parliamentary Joint Committee of Public Accounts, a very important committee in Australia, who looked at defence project management and came out with a very strong recommendation that we adopt earned value management. And so since then, we have been developing both the policy and the practice, and we've been doing that in close cooperation with the United States Defence Department.
So we're working together with people from the United States, Canada, and Australia, and sharing experiences on using earned value management. You need to integrate the technical information, schedule, and cost information to be able to manage a project.
I think the principal issue with earned value management is the question that it is fundamental to project management. You do need this systematic approach. We have found that from our point of view, that is the Australian Department of Defence, it is a very useful, disciplined approach.
The same qualities that have made earned value a robust management tool in the United States have made it popular throughout the world.
The criteria are essentially the same. The terminology is very similar. Indeed, so similar that we actually use a lot of the US software tools in our processes.
With the EVM, you are able to tell people where you are in the project, how much you have performed so far, compare schedule with where you want it to be, as well as cost information, and then integrate and make projections as well where you will continue.
There are a couple of unique aspects. The first of those is that we use a lot of fixed price contracts. We don't do a lot of the major development work that the US does. And so we're actually applying earned value management in fixed price contracts. The other main aspect is that we are increasingly using earned value to determine progress payments, so that the progressive payments are actually tied to progress, demonstrated progress in the earned value system.
Sweden first used EVM-type principles for development of its Gripen aircraft program, but not to the detailed extent typically required with CSCSC.
The Gripen is Sweden's new multi-role military airplane for defense purposes. It's supersonic and multi-role, being able to work in a fighter role, attack role, and reconnaissance role in the very same airplane. EVM gives the buyer an overview that's simple to understand of the situation in the project, and that it can also be easily communicated to top management. And it's been very valuable for us in the Gripen project.
One key element to implementing EVM on a global basis is communication.
Yes, there does have to be extensive cooperation between the countries. And I don't think I can emphasise too much the staff exchange aspects. Having your practitioners come to Australia, having our people here, which promotes that commonality.
An organization which fosters global cooperation is the International Performance Management Council. The IPMC was formed in 1993 under the agreement that by sharing information on a global level, the use of resources allocated to defense acquisition could be improved. Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Sweden, and the United States are all formal members, with the United Kingdom being a regular participant.
We have implemented earned value management in a little bit different ways, different countries, different circumstances, but we can learn a lot by working together.
In 1995, Australia, Canada, and the United States formalized their cooperation by signing a trilateral Memorandum of Understanding. The scope of this memorandum includes the exchange of information regarding cost and schedule performance, management policies and procedures. the exchange of information regarding contractors and subcontractors subject to cost and schedule performance management requirements, the mutual recognition of contractors accepted as compliant with each participant's cost and schedule performance management requirements, the advocacy of improved project management in government and industry based on effective risk assessment and integrated cost, schedule, and technical performance objectives using earned value as the integrating tool, and the outreach to industry, academia, and professional associations in furtherance of these activities.
Yes, as the world is becoming smaller, the global cooperation is increasing, and the use of EVM will increase as well. And there are a number of good reasons. EVM will make it possible to better use of taxpayers as well as shareholders' money. EVM will also help project managers as corporate managers to achieve performance on schedule and on cost.
The growing acceptance of earned value management by both government and industry in other countries is a strong endorsement. EVM and its underlying management principles are in fact universal.
Because of the globalization of the industry, because of increasing collaborative activity, not only in defence, but outside of that, you see it, that kind of thing spreading, and I believe you'll see it as being fairly fundamental, if not in the precise form that it's now used by the United States Department of Defence or ourselves, but something very similar. I think what you'll see is probably a slightly simplified form becoming standard throughout industry.
We're trying to work with agencies all over the government to find the best ways to do capital budgeting. It's not just OMB itself, it's very much a joint effort. It's a network of managers from more than 30 agencies. We're trying to find the best techniques, the best ideas to improve capital budgeting in their own organizations. What we try to do is break the capital programming process into a series of 4 phases that begins with planning, works through the acquisition of resources or budgeting phase, moves through procurement, but takes into account the 4th very important phase, management of the asset while it's in use. Within each of these interrelated phases, we, that is the team working on the project, were able to identify a series of crucial steps which need to be taken in order to properly implement good capital programming. What we're trying to do in identifying in each of the phases the best way to do something, many times government is the place where these best practices are found. Earned value management is one of the key practices that we and our partners identified as being important to capital programming. Understanding cost, schedule, and performance, being able to set up a management system that looks carefully at these throughout the life cycle of the project is critical to the success not only of establishing a capital program, but properly carrying it out. GAO has been a great partner with us throughout the creation of the Capital Programming Guide. They too believe that earned value management is the best practice, the best technique for establishing costs, schedule, and performance in a systematic way. We're requiring each of the agencies that submit their budgets through us to have earned value management as a key component, and the A11 process allows agencies to lay out schedules for multiple year capital programs that are based on earned value management and its concepts. In performance-based contracting, establishing the scope of work, the items the contractor is responsible for, needs to be based on a systematic understanding of how the asset will be procured and what it will produce. Earned value management gives us the ability to set up a systematic way of finding out what that scope of work should be and then monitoring it over the life of the contract and into the execution phase
where the asset functions for the agency. In terms of budgeting, OMB has been using earned value management as a way to anticipate the multi-year funding requirements that agencies will have for particular long-term capital projects, and also to look at the existing capital stock in light of the mission of the agency and its overall objectives. Earned value management gives us that systemic management tool for making these decisions. The recent legislation that enacted the Government Performance and Results Act, additional legislation that created the Federal Acquisition Streamlining Act, and finally the Information Technology Management Reform Act are all not only consistent with, but dependent on a management system like earned value management. Each focuses on performance. Performance of a procurement process, performance of a technology asset, performance of an organization overall. And unless you understand how the cost of that performance and its schedule are interrelated, it's very difficult not just to be in compliance with the letter of the Act, but to undertake the very important management reforms that are at the core of the philosophy around which this legislation was crafted.
Seven, we have a go for main engine start. 4, 3, 2, 1. We have booster ignition and liftoff of the Space Shuttle Atlantis.
The Space Shuttle, one of the sparkling jewels of America's space program.
Presence in space.
It's an awesome feeling.
7 million pounds of thrust lift tons of sophisticated technology.
Every one, you get a little goosebumps on you. Because nothing is, although we've flown 86 of these now as of last week, it's still exciting.
The shuttle's largest and most visible element is the external tank.
It's the big orange component that sits in the middle and carries the fuel for the space shuttle's main engine.
It also serves as the structural backbone for the shuttle.
This giant cylinder, higher than a 15-story building, is the only major non-reusable component of the shuttle system. This means that for every shuttle launch, a new tank must be constructed.
We have a third-generation tank that we're building and currently certifying for flight.
Over 481,000 parts go into producing one superlight external tank. And that doesn't include an additional 38 miles of electrical wiring, 1,000 feet of insulated sleeving, 4.7 miles of tape, and 4,900 pounds of thermal protection system materials.
79.
It takes more than a half-mile of welding to join together the aluminum panels that form the tank. What keeps a project of this magnitude on track?
We needed a barometer, a measuring tool, if you will. So we came to be more reliant on the earned value system to give us the metrics that we need to see where we're moving and going, as well as managing our budget.
Earned value. It's the key management tool to making the external tank project a success.
And earned value helps you relate cost to schedule so that you understand how you're performing against your program. Are you going to be able to meet your milestones? And do you need additional resources, or do you have too many resources applied in one place? And how to manage that relationship.
We use earned value to keep ourselves in a reporting system and to keep our annual budgets in line, as well as our 5-year projections.
Earned value has always been an integral part of the external tank program.
The external tank has always utilized an earned value system. As time has gone on, we've evolved with the system, and we've made it more usable, more measurable.
When the contract was first signed in the 1973 timeframe, we had some original milestones established then, and we used earned value in partnership with NASA to help manage the program at the time. Since that time, we've refined the process of earned value, helped roll it out to different parts of the organization, so that more and more people could become aware of the process and how it's used.
In program management, we're required to track technical elements, cost elements, and schedule elements.
Earned value trickles down to all levels of management.
The earned value system allows me to identify milestones associated with dates, due dates, as well as the cost elements that are required for all of those things. The tracking system lets me track how far I've performed, how much I performed, what amount of data I've gotten, along with where I am as a function of time.
The earned value system is definitely a tool that helps integrate cost and schedule. On the factory floor, when you're building widgets, you can watch a widget being machined and bolted together and hooked together, and you finally get a major widget out of the other end. And you had detailed plans that accomplish that. In the engineering environment or the white-collar environment, those processes or those intermediate products are not as visible. You have a drawing, or you have a report, or you have a document. And as a manager, to have some sense of how we're proceeding on delivering those things on time is important. That's what the earned value system does for us.
Teamwork is at the heart of earned value management. Along with this teamwork comes responsibility and empowerment.
We used IPTs, integrated product teams, for the development activities of the super lightweight tank. At that point, we did relegate to each of these IPTs a certain amount of the budget.
My team was a systems engineering team. In a systems engineering function, I had responsibility, my team had responsibility for flowing requirements out to the different operating teams, for spreading the information out to those design teams, and then making sure that the designs we were making met those requirements. There was a lot of integration required and a lot of communication.
It was interesting to see how those technical folks responded in an environment where they had to also be accountable for cost.
So besides being able to track what's typically a level of effort activity on my own team and the things that we were responsible for, the earned value system gave me visibility of what was going on in the other teams.
And it worked out pretty well.
Indeed it has. Earned value management has helped keep the Superlight external tank project on track, resulting in significant cost savings.
We had rebaselined the program about 5 years ago, and since that time we've been able to return to the program about $1.6 billion. So that's quite a savings return in a short period of time. And of course, when you're doing that, you need to have the tracking mechanism that keeps up with that. So earned value has been a very effective tool in allowing us to do that.
Earned value management fosters partnerships. It gives the government and industry the tools they need to work together.
With Lockheed Martin, our contractor, and with NASA, we utilize the system. It really helps us in communication. It allows us a common baseline that we understand the health of the project.
The earned value system creates a much more positive relationship with the government. It takes very distant milestones and provides information in between those milestones so that there's less arm waving and a little bit more management by fact.
Earned value management. It's a concept that works for the government, for the contractor, and ultimately for the American taxpayer.
As you've just seen in our case studies, earned value management has a wide range of applications. We have a call, I understand, standing by, so let's take that first from Dallas, Texas. Go ahead, Dallas.
Hello, this is Shelley Imbert from Raytheon TI Systems, and I have a question for the panel. With the use of the performance-based billings, will there be a requirement for an earned value management system to be in place?
Do you want to repeat that?
Yeah, could you repeat it?
Are you still on the line? Could you
Yes.
repeat your question?
Sure. With the use of performance-based billings, will there be a requirement for an earned value management system to be in place?
Who wants to start with that one?
I can start.
Okay, Kevin, go ahead.
I mean, we're not in that situation, but I guess in my view is that would be real important to have earned value management. I mean, the one thing you get from earned value management is actually the combination of where you are from a cost, schedule, and performance. So I would think it would be a good application to have earned value management.
Any other thoughts on that? Yeah. All right. One of the topics that we discussed in our last panel, prior to our break, was the concept of IBR. And IBR is Integrated Baseline Review, for those of you who don't know that. Let me ask the panel, how do you do your IBRs, your Integrated Baseline Reviews? Do you want to, let's start over here with NASA.
Okay. Well, we have a team of people that go out and will review the contract, the plan that was put in place, and it's composed of a team of the technical managers, technical officer, and some independent people, one of which at least sees a lot of contracts. It's a very valuable tool for understanding what's going on with that baseline. It was mentioned earlier in one of the case studies that that we need to have a good plan and to work out the schedules and to make engineers sit down and do that is a difficult thing to do. The integrated baseline review forces people to put a lot of consideration and thought into that. It also reduces the amount of optimism, I'll say, that tends to be in the plans, as you have to explain it to somebody else. But I think the most important piece of it is that it will facilitate communications down the road, as everybody understands the same plan and can work to the same set of music, as was said earlier.
How about the Crusader program?
Talk about our integrated baseline review. It was a long process starting way before the actual, what we call the IBR. I mean, we were lucky and some people say in some aspects that we had a sole source contract. So part and parcel to building the development proposal, we were doing requirements analysis, concept evaluation, and establishing our program planning and documentation. So by the time we got to the IBR, our technical guys had been working hand in hand with the contractor, identifying what are the technical tasks. So really the IBR focused on what's the critical path, how are the things linked, and really got earned value experts involved with the engineers to help them with what are the right metrics. You know, how do you measure that particular task? And you talked about software earlier. Where we're at in development, a lot of our development efforts don't give you any physical evidence any more than software does. So that's where metrics are really important. And the other thing I think that's real important is really the result of your IBR is your start. I mean, that's where you start. Now you can know where you change risks, where you establish risks, and you may move risks, you may reallocate resources, but you had a baseline to start with. And really the IBR results are the start, not the end.
How about on MIDS?
We had a little bit of a unique situation. That was that we had a prime contractor that most of the work would be done by the subs at the beginning, and we also had subcontractors that had not used earned value management before. So we'd started off with training before contract award, but when we got to the point of awarding the contract, we had an incentive to lay in a baseline. And the time the contractor had the baseline laid in, we formed a teaming arrangement with the prime contractor where we trained our teams in earned value management principles, continued our training. We went ahead and we laid out what were the major technical areas and specifically areas of risk. We then went out to the contractors' sites in Europe and the U.S., visited each of them, and started that process of, if you would, teaming to make a success of the program by understanding how they'd laid out the baseline, the time phasing, established really the basis for the effective implementation of integrated product teams. And then you continue the process through IPTs. We followed up with another IBR after we did a major modification to the contract. DCMC was a part of that process all along, very strong support for the process. We continue that then in reviewing that technical performance and the baseline at each of the program management reviews and the IPTs.
How about on JPATS?
Well, JPATS, we were in a competitive source selection, so part of the contract requirements was to set up integrated product teams. Requirements for an IBR 120 days after contract award. We also had to focus from both sides is get the program manager pushing down to the technical folks to get trained in IBR and earned value management systems and processes. We put together a training program both individually from the contractor and the government side, and then we also had a joint training program. So total collectively we had over 70 hours of training before we went into the first IBR, and the first IBR was on the development program. And it really wasn't a surveillance. We went in there to understand, first of all, what the technical content was. We had to understand where the contractor was putting resources against, as well as the schedule accompanying that. So you look at technical, you validate the budget and the schedule, and you come back and you identify the risk areas out of that. And based on that, we got together with the contractor prime at the end of about 3.5 days, is all it took for the interviewer, the IBR, laid out a joint risk plan or program in which we now have a baseline, we know where the risks are, and as we implement an EVMS on a monthly basis in the reviews, almost basically or twice a month, we can at least know where we are in the high-risk areas of the program. And in fact, we conducted a second IBR on the production side of the program about 4 months later.
We have a call from Hampton, Virginia. Go ahead, Hampton.
Yes, first I would like to request that I be able to ask you both my questions without being cut off. So if I have any follow-up questions, they can be properly answered. My first question is, I'm not seeing how EVM is different from NASA's current performance measurement system reporting that we are now receiving. And it appears as if the last story supports that. I would like to know if you're in agreement that it seems like EVM is just a new term that has been coined for what we're currently doing.
And did you want to ask your second question, or you want the answer to the first
I
one?
would like the answer to the first one first.
Okay. How about it, panel?
I guess I'll take a stab at that.
Sure, go ahead.
Being from the NASA side, I think you're right that what we're doing is largely what's encompassed in EVM. It's perhaps a broader terminology for PMS, and I think Bob Patty said it earlier in the previous panel, that what it really encompasses is not only a measurement technique but good management practices. So I would say that the implementation that you're perhaps doing is very similar or probably identical to EVM.
Some other thoughts?
I'll get one other one. You made a comment that this PMR, or Performance Measurement Report, you kind of define it just as a report. Remember, whether you call the EVMS report, you're not using the report. It's the data in the report that you need to look at. Your CAMs, your cost account managers, in our case, we have government CAMs looking at the same WBSs, and we're going against what these guys are doing, the progress they are making. It is not just a report. If you just look at it as a monthly report, well, it's old news. The data you're getting has got to be a little more real-time, verbally, over the phone, talking at the CAMs and say, okay, I've got technical, where am I on cost and budget? And if you have a problem or start sensing a problem, you are already trying to find a solution while you're making the report, which is sometimes a month old. So it's not just a report. It's an active tool that you can use daily to determine where you're at in the program.
Go ahead.
I think that the earned value management is trying to take it and go beyond the report. I've had situations where some of the program managers still thought earned value management was, in fact, all the effort to get a report out on a monthly basis. The answer is that that report gives you a snapshot in time of the macro picture of the program and or the contract performance. But what it really needs to be used is on that daily basis to be measuring the performance of the program, that when the teams meet and they talk about performance, that they're using the same information that goes into the report to status the program and make data-driven decisions on a daily basis instead of just basing it upon technical, also looking at the cost and schedule implications of the data.
Hampton, do you have a follow-up question you wanted to ask?
First, I'd just like to say that maybe I didn't properly state the question. We do review the data from technical cost and schedule. If this is going to help real time, then I'm all for it. We do have weekly telecons on a regular basis, at least for our large contracts. I'm still not seeing a difference. I'm not just looking at report. Obviously, I am checking the data in the report. To the second question, in the first session, there was a comment made by the lady that was on the panel that EVM did not apply to contracts that were providing for progress payments, and I do not understand what she was talking about because the majority of our cost contracts, of course, have progress payment provisions. And maybe she wasn't making it clear, and maybe she just meant fixed price contracts. Could you please clarify that?
Is there anyone here who wants to tackle that, or? Because we can take your question and get you an answer back after the broadcast.
Okay.
I think her one comment was, though, it was applied more to fixed price contracts. The
would
caller did imply it was a cost type contract.
If I could, one other thing.
Sure.
Let me say that, again, when you say you get the report, if you're in government, it's more important to me that system that the contractor is using to plan, to resource, to budget, to status, the performance of his effort. And so that the report that comes to the government is, if you would, a byproduct of an effective management system to manage the program. If you can't produce a report, you should have questions about whether or not they have a management system that's capable of producing a report and therefore capable of managing the effort. The government gets that information, but what's important to me is the contractor is using it on a daily basis to optimize the performance of the contractor and the program in the contract.
Hampton, please stay on the line so we can get your number so we can get back to you on this question. And someone from our staff will take care of that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. We have a question from the audience that someone in the audience wanted to ask. There we go. Hello.
Hi. I'm Susie Meyer. I'm with the MITRE Corporation. My question goes with risk management, and I'm wondering how EVM helps you on your program, also using risk management.
Okay, we talked a little bit about that in the first panel. Who'd like to stay with it? Okay, go ahead.
I can talk to it quite a bit. As part of building the initial program baseline, we established our technical risks, which were both hardware and software. So built into our plan, we have risk mitigation plans and action plans, both hardware and software, that you can track. And then once you had the baseline established, in addition to that, we use that information really to do our schedule and cost risk assessments. Okay, as you look at the resources to do that job, and you do the assessments of using a Monte Carlo simulation of some sort, to what is the probability, cost, and schedule-wise of those given tasks. And then as you go through and things are successful or not successful, you can reallocate risks as you go through. And when you do your integrated program baseline, which Frank talked about, a big part of what you focus on is where you know the risks are.
Anyone else want to take that? If not, we have a call waiting from Albany, Georgia. Go ahead, Albany. Albany, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Go ahead. Go ahead with your call, with your question.
Yes, my name is Major Mike Cloudy with the Marine Corps Logistics Base, Albany, Georgia. We're seeking to incorporate EVM into the Better Businesses practices that we are anticipating using at our 2 depot-level maintenance centers. My first question is if the panelists have any recommendations concerning tailoring of EVM for a remanufacture or rebuild facility where the condition of the vehicles that are being inducted into the repair cycle are themselves a primary performance variance driver.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I guess the point I'd make is that I think it is applicable to doing it in such an activity. The first thing is that, yes, you're going to have, I think what you were saying is you'll have variability in the different airframes that come in and what work has to be done on them. You're going to establish a minimum baseline, though, of expected work to be done. Somebody's got to determine how much that's going to cost, the time phasing, the resources that are going to be applied to that, and then to manage the performance that is actually achieved against that baseline. As you go through that process, you're going to gain information that will allow you to then directly input the data into your future inductions and how you're going to estimate the cost of those, because you're into a recurring, repetitive program, and you can use the earned value management data that comes out of the system not only for the performance that you're currently in of the products and the airframes coming through, but the future airframes that come in.
Anyone else like to add to that?
Well, the only thing I wanted to add is essentially what the captain has said. There is work to be done, and you can package that work. And that's the key to an EVM map. What is the work to be done? And as he said, the cost and schedule against it. And it not only applies to a depot level, production lines, the same thing. And then you analyze the data, and then you update your data as appropriate for the next one coming down the line or the next system coming down the line.
Thank you. We have a call from St. Louis, Missouri. Go ahead, St. Louis.
Hello?
Hello.
Yes.
Welcome.
Welcome. Oh, great. My name's DJ Eberlin from Boeing, St. Louis. And my question pertains to, with the use of IPTs and going more towards EVMS and allowing to possibly report how we're managed, do you see a gravitation of maybe of getting away from the importance of the WBS and more so on the day-to-day working with the customer via the IPTs?
The WBS, the work breakdown structure. Who would like to take that?
I'll take it. I don't necessarily understand the piece of the WBS, because what the WBS does, and as you probably know, it's not always easy establishing that, working with all the people that have a say in how a WBS should structure, but you need a WBS because you have to identify a systematic way to identify how you're going to do and break down work. And I mean, in our WBS, once you establish it, that's where you assign your risk to, or any of your resourcing or anything like that. As part of, when you talk to IPTs, there's a lot there. It's almost a two-way street. You talk about how to build a baseline. Well, it's real important that working in an IPT team and environment to build a good baseline, again, as somebody said earlier, the thing that's real important, that now that everybody in the program is talking from the same sheet of music, no matter where they sit, at all levels of management, and that's one big piece of the baseline. The other piece of it is from acquisition reform and work in IPTs, we don't have any Seadrels. We don't have any data deliverable. The only deliverables on our contract are our prototypes, which happened in 0001. So earned value management is the thing we use to, we don't have any design reviews either. It's the thing we use on a monthly basis to essentially status development. So I mean, it's really essential to IPD work, and I found that it's ended up being the most important tool to make IPD successful.
Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, we've taken and broken down the WBS down to having relationships and responsibilities for the individual engineers in the program office, in industry, as well as in the government. And so that there are responsibility assignment matrix, and when I do a monthly review of the status of the program and the reporting of the program, I depend upon the engineers to give me that data that relates to their areas and to highlight where the major risks or issues are. When we have program management reviews, we again break the information down that we look at by the WBS and its relationship to other WBSs. So the WBS formed the structure to identify what the work is, along with the dictionary to differentiate between different pieces of the WBS.
Chris.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that the WBS is a very important piece of the plan that you ultimately put together, and it does facilitate the communications, as Kevin mentioned earlier. I just wanted to make, to emphasize you have to have all of those pieces, including a WBS. I don't see a IPT making the WBS go away at all.
Frank?
Well, the only comment I have, if you build the plan and have a common thread where you can thread from requirements to WBS to IPTs, you can actually design and tailor your report to the IPT and have it reported via the IPT. You have your cost account managers below that, but you can report it as an IPT. In fact, when a JPATS program do report cost accounts via the IPT process, and it's our format too.
Well, it looks like the WBS is important to this panel. We have a question from the audience. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Yvette Dennis from the Office of Management Budget. How does DCMC support you in earned value management?
Well, that's a good question. Why don't we start over here with Kevin?
DCMC, they play a lot of different roles. On our program, they're real important from an IPT technical aspect. They provide people that actually are there on location and sit in the PDT's meetings. Secondly, they provide very good insight on the financial matter and giving us their assessments of things like estimate at complete and giving us that type of assessment. And thirdly, which you heard earlier from Jill, is now their role is also surveillance, which is something that they're getting into, that they work with us and the contractor to do that job.
We had early and we've had continuous support from DCMC. We went out and did training in 5 different countries with DCMC before contract award. Subsequently, they've been a part of the surveillance team, the program integrator, and a project support team that is both in the U.S. and Europe. Is all integrated. It participates in program management reviews. They participate even when the contractor gets in data from the subcontractors of earned value. A member from DCMC, the PI is right there in that initial review in the meeting to listen to the contractor wrestle with what that data says and the interpretation, and does it match with everything else that he knows.
Chris, how about DCMC and civilian agencies?
DCMC has been very helpful for us in a lot of the ways that you've just heard. In addition, one of our best people for us is sitting in the audience today, and he went on to bigger and better things. But DCMC provides all the insights that Kevin provided, but they provide an additional one that we find very useful. They know what's going on in the plant on a daily basis and can add some additional dimension to the variance analysis to say this work or that work is being offset by higher priority work in the plant. And that's something that often you don't get from the facility folks. So we've used DCMC very extensively and have found it very helpful.
Frank, go ahead.
I've got another comment. Specifically, DCMC is part of the earned value management and our government cost account managers. 45% of my contract is G&A, overhead, cost of money. I have a DCMC ACO who is my cost account manager, the government cost account manager, and she monitors that. And since she's there in the plan, as everyone said, she has a lot closer contact on the fluidity of what's going on around at the government facility, or contractor facility. Sorry about that.
Let's go to our audience. Our audience has a question.
Yes, I'm Marsha Whitehouse. I'm from the Boeing Company in St. Louis, and I have one question and one comment, if I could. Who has the responsibility of earned value information at the program office?
I'd like to step at that one. Again, what I've tried to describe, we've set up government cost account managers. I have a one-for-one match with the cost account managers at the contractor's facility with one of our government folks. We match it up. They may have a couple cost accounts, but they're matched up. They are responsible for managing that cost account. And through the process of IPT reviews, program management reviews, any of the problem areas will filter up to the higher level IPT. But it's down at the IPT, down at the cost account, and they're responsible for management. In fact, they report on it to me as the program manager on a monthly basis on the key areas that we're maybe having some problems with.
Go ahead.
If you talk to people in my office, they would say that everyone involved in anything that touches the contract and contract execution has a direct responsibility for knowing and understanding earned value and the status on the program. They would probably tell you that I consider myself to be the person that's responsible for the cost performance on the program. And that's why I put high attention to it, have a monthly review even if I know what the status is. By reading the report to myself, other people talk to me about it, because I'm the guy that's responsible for the execution of the program, the performance of the contractor, and so I take it very seriously that has to go all the way up to the top.
Kevin,
you think about, I mean, they said the right thing. I mean, everybody's responsible. I mean, if you think about what anybody's job is, I mean, they own a piece of the program and they're responsible, whether they're a test guy or a logistics guy, whether they're part of a PDT, a functional area, a finance guy. The information is available in the earned value management. The thing that I find real important is in the state of IPTs, you have a tendency to have individual PDTs where they could tell you what they're doing, they could tell you where they're off track, and they could tell you how they're going to get well. What the integrated baseline allows you to do is do the horizontal and vertical slices of how do they fit into the program objectives. You know, so they own their piece of the program, and they've always got to put it in context of what does it mean to the program, not to their individual piece.
Chris, do you want to comment?
Nothing really to add. Everybody is responsible for cost performance, schedule performance, and technical performance.
And you said you had a comment.
Yes, I do, and it's probably a follow-up comment to the previous phone call from St. Louis. It appears that the importance of WBS reporting is recognized, but it appears as though we're also reporting in different ways, like contract line items, CLINs, if you will, or statement of work paragraph, or perhaps funding sources, and I would like some comment on that.
We have some response to that?
I mean, on our contract, really, we basically report costs by WBS using earned value management, but we also will collect costs. The only CLINs would be in a resupply vehicle and a self-propelled howitzer to be able to separate the difference between the two vehicles.
We've taken and used, we use the WBS, we report to the WBS. We also have a CSFR that is related to CLINs as well, because we have a reporting requirement also for cost allocation between a common and a national cost to 5 different countries. So we've used a combination of CPR reporting based upon the WBS elements and CLIN reporting to be able to manage how much money do we need, obligations under the contract, and assessing to the nations what their obligations are.
Any other?
I think we have done is, I made a comment earlier, is about the common thread. You must, no matter how you get the report, whether it's WBS, IPT, the thread behind it is what the requirements were, how you've broken out the work, whether a contractor writes an internal statement of work. He has a WBS associated with it. It's going to go against a CLIN item because that's where the cost is coming in. So there is a common thread. So I think that you can report it any way that you as a manager are going to use it, but you still have to have all the threads. They've got to be tied together in order to make it an effective tool.
Well, unfortunately, we've run out of time, and we have to wrap up our live question and answer session. I'm sorry if we didn't get to your question. If you faxed in a question that we haven't answered, we will get back to you with a response. And if you have questions after the broadcast, please contact us through the address and numbers you now see on the screen. This information will appear on the screen again at the end of our program. Following the broadcast, we'll also provide a list of EVM resources. In addition, you can learn more about EVM resources by visiting the EVM website at www.acq.osd.mil/pm. At this point, I want to take a moment to extend a special thank you to someone who has been instrumental in the production of our broadcast. Pat Brooks, our supervising producer, is too modest to step out here and accept our thanks in person. Nonetheless, we in the Office of the Deputy Undersecretary of Defense, Acquisition Reform, appreciate her tireless efforts coordinating all the details that go into these broadcasts. Pat, thank you. And let's give Pat a round of applause. Before we go, I want to thank our second panel, Kevin Fahey, Captain Dave Fitch, Lieutenant Colonel Frank Salgecco, and finally, Chris Scalise. Studio audience, let's give them a hand. On behalf of the Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition Reform and the Administrator of the Office of Federal Procurement Policy, I want to thank everyone who participated in our broadcast today, especially you, our viewing audience. It is through your commitment to acquisition reform efforts that we will achieve our goal of becoming the world's smartest, most efficient, most responsive buyer of best value goods and services that meet the warfighter's needs and are obtained from a globally competitive national industrial base. Please join us on January 28, 1998, for our first in a series of 4 winter broadcasts. For a broadcast schedule, topics, and other information, log on to the websites you now see on this screen. This information will be shown again at the end of the broadcast. Thanks for joining us. See you in January.